Hi everyone, thanks so much for joining and hi to those who are streaming in online. I'm Laura, co-founder of After the Pandemic, which is an initiative to rethink our environment, reimagine our cities and redesign the communities around us to be more vibrant, more resilient and more sustainable. So, thanks guys in the back. So there's nothing quite like the community that surrounds football and really the power that it has to unite people. And as our city hosts COP, unity is one of the most important things going forward as we face into the future and how we could come together to find solutions for climate change. So it's a pleasure for me to introduce Wolfgang Blau, who is co-founder of the Oxford Climate Journalism Network and previously chief exec of Condé Nast. Just a quick word from me and my co-founders at After the Pandemic. Thank you, Wolfgang, for being here, for your support over the past year, and generally just the advice that you give us as After the Pandemic continues to grow. So he's joined by an amazing panel here today of climate experts and people in the Scottish footballing community to discuss tonight about how we can kickstart the conversation about climate in football. So housekeeping wise, there's no fire alarm planned. So if you hear one, please make your way out there. Please tweet about us tonight, spread our message. Feel free to ask questions, take photographs, but if you could keep your phones on silent, that would be amazing. So over to you, Wolfgang. Thank you.
Is my mic on? Thank you, Laura. Hello, everyone. So we'll just so you know, we'll discuss here maybe for 30 minutes, and then certainly we want to hear from you what you think, what you know, what you want to add to that. But we'll start with a quick presentation from Elliot Arthur-Worsop, the founder of Football for Future. And he and I just had a chat and we thought we really need to widen the circle of this conversation. And that's how we ended up here together with After the Pandemic, which is fantastic. Elliot, over to you for about 10 minutes just to give us the overview, and then we start the discussion.
Hello. It works. So by way of introduction, hey, what's up, everyone? My name's Elliot. I'm the founder and co-director at Football for Future. I guess first and foremost, I'm actually a Brighton fan. I've got a background in the environmental sciences, climate communication, social movements, and all that sort of fun stuff. Yeah, I guess, we're all here to talk about football and sustainability in, one of the strongholds or, one of the most historic cities that football is associated with. I think the oldest, most historic football derby is here in Glasgow, the Old Firm derby between Celtic and Rangers. But before we go into the details, and, everyone's in Glasgow, everyone's up at COP talking about sustainability, this, net zero, that. But I just wanted to pay a little bit of lip service and contextualize this conversation with the bigger picture of what's happening to the earth right now, just for a couple of minutes, just talking about climate change. So obviously I'm preaching to the converted here, but an essential place to start is with the peer-reviewed scientific consensus, right? So human-caused climate change and ecological destruction will be the defining issue of humanity and potentially life on Earth, right? So we're seeing disruption to the natural environment and biosphere on a scale scarcely seen throughout the 3.2 billion year history of life on Earth, and this is accelerating on all fronts. Yes, climate change is natural, species extinction is natural, but what we're witnessing around us when put into the context of Earth's geologic and ecological history is very unnatural, with the only similar precedents having resulted in mass extinction events, and all data suggests that we're on track for changes more exponential and unpredictable than what caused any of the previous critical events in the Earth's geological or meteorological record. For further context, the greatest mass extinction event in the history of life on Earth, the Permian-Triassic, or the Great Dying 250 million years ago, was the result of rapid climate change. That was about 7 degrees Celsius increase in global average temperatures over 750,000 years or so. Species evolution couldn't keep up with the changing natural world, trophic cascades, ecological collapse, mass extinction. If we're very lucky, we're looking at increasing the global average temperatures by 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels by 2040. So that's 1.5 in 200 years, right? It's insane. And our current temperature increase is likely to accelerate due to the current trends, not only in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, but also the destruction of carbon sinks, acidification of the ocean, and general habitat destruction. And this is without taking critical thresholds and positive feedback loops into account. But don't take it from me, take it from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. These are UN reports published every 6 years or so, which are the most comprehensive synthesis papers that exist on climate. Thousands of experts around the world contribute, assessing tens of thousands of peer-reviewed papers based on relevant environmental science, technical and socioeconomic information. These are literally the most rigorous reports, scientific reports ever written. But, you know, it's some people still deny it, which is quite funny, I guess, but also quite tragic. But there's lots of growing momentum and evidence-based hope, which is super cool, which suggests we can turn this game around. The climate movement's growing, developing, diversifying, and what was once a fringe conversation and something only experts or hippies were thought to engage with is now becoming a little bit more mainstream. Nothing is more important than protecting the planet, and no social phenomenon is more powerful than football. Okay, here we go. That was meant to be up for that little part, but here we go, moving on briefly. Okay, so the relationship between football and climate change is quite complex. It's multidimensional. It's really interesting. Obviously, at face value, it's quite intimate. We play football outside, we play on grass, we depend on the oxygen in the air to fill our lungs, to power those gut-busting runs up the pitch. Okay, but you know, going into a little bit more detail now, you know, there's an interrelationship between climate change and football, right? Climate change affects football, but football has an impact on the environment. But first, let's start with the impact of climate on football, specifically infrastructure. So this picture here is Carlisle United Stadium in, I think, 2015 after Storm Desmond. It's quite an iconic image in this space. So obviously, you know, a lot of pitches, stadiums, infrastructure, not just football, this is just generally, but we're here to talk about football. Hey, it can have devastating impacts for the economies of clubs, finances of clubs, and also the surrounding areas. 2 years ago, Football for Future chairman David Goldblatt wrote a report called Playing Against the Clock. It found that by 2050, 25%, 1/4 of all professional English football league stadiums are at risk of partial or total annual flooding, which is pretty crazy. That didn't take into account the women's game, and obviously grassroots football will be affected far more significantly, and a lot of this data can be extrapolated around the world. So yeah, from a business point of view, you know, there's lots of risk. Climate resilience is a really important thing for clubs to be considering, and from a fan point of view, it's devastating thinking that your club might go underwater, unless I guess it's Selhurst Park. So no, sorry about that. Also, you know, it affects the athletes. You know, if we're going to go to the local, the personal, the player, extreme heat, for example. Oopsie, there's a nice picture of Jordan Pickford for you guys. So extreme heat is obviously a big thing for the players. Just this summer in Japan at the Olympics for Great Britain, women's team got to the final and their match was disrupted and delayed due to a heat wave. Obviously, the World Cup next year in Qatar, one of the hottest parts of the world. In the Middle East, they're always smashing, you know, record temperatures. So that's being played in the winter, which is going to be a bit weird, isn't it? But then, you know, there's also a really interesting relationship that football has on the climate. It's multifaceted. At Football for Future, you know, we say that everything can become more sustainable, from carbon to waste. You know, we're all key players. Everyone who's involved in football has a bit of a responsibility. And so to best understand this, you know, let's break it down to the match day experience. What do we do first? We travel about 70 to 80%. So much more research needs to be done into this as well. Not enough academics are studying football. It's, you know, not taken seriously so much, but it looks like about 70 to 80% of the global football industry's carbon footprint comes from travel. So, you know, think, how do you get to the game? You car sharing, you walk in, ride in public transport. And what about you know, when you're at the stadium, you know, what are the operations like? What food is on offer, the drink, what's at the club shop, what energy are they using, and all this sort of stuff. So there's like, you know, more the business side of it. My personal passion is in social change. I think football has incredible potential to raise people's awareness about loads of different issues. We've seen with BLM, you know, at the moment, women's football is blowing up here in the UK, which is great to see. There's LGBT conversations as well, which is super cool. And just a little bit more about Football for Future real quick. So we're a team of football fans, first and foremost. Climate scientists, climate communication experts, sustainability experts. We have a passion for making the world a better place. What do we do? Well, our mission is to build a more environmentally sustainable culture in English football. We do this in many different ways by running educational workshops on the relationship between these two things. I'm going to show you a video of this in a moment. We work with player champions, you know, supporting players who care about this to, you know, use their platform to speak up with confidence. You know, as climate communication experts, we feel like that's a really essential service that we provide in terms of raising awareness. And then we also facilitate the implementation of sustainable practices within the industry, working with clubs. We've got a really exciting project, hopefully launching before the end of this year with a top 10 Premier League club. We've got Tom Ralston, who's in the room, who was the first Chief Sustainability Officer in English football. And, you know, together we've got an amazing team, and we're all blazing a trail together along with everyone who wants to work with us. You know, we really are all on the same team for this one. Also, yeah, follow us on website and socials, Football for Future. Shout out to Pledgeball as well. They're another amazing organization working in the football and sustainability space. And quickly, here's a little video of a project that we recently did with Chelsea, Spurs, Nike. Mason Mount features in it as well. He's the most famous English footballer who's spoken up about sustainability and climate change, which we're all very proud of. I don't know how to press go, but I guess just next.
Sustainability is really important for all of us to learn about. And if we all do our bit, we can help to make a change.
For Future is a new charity with the mission to build a more environmentally sustainable culture within the beautiful game. So we've just engaged over 150 young Londoners in this really cool conversation on the relationship between football and climate change, to Bloomsbury Football, Football Beyond Borders, and the foundations of Spurs and Chelsea.
I thought it was really interesting. I never really thought about this relationship between sustainability and football, but today really inspired me.
Football's an outdoor game. We depend really heavily on weather conditions for playing football and being safe in those conditions. There's also a big impact that comes from the football industry onto the climate. Travel, food, and a lot of the other processes that we're used to taking part in on a match day.
Over 3 billion people watch football, so it's important that football does its bit.
Football is just the universal sport. Everybody loves it. It's the universal language. Our young people live and breathe it. And so it's a great tool to be able to bring these sorts of topics in.
It's been really great for us to work with Football for Future and Nike on this workshop. And the students have come, they've been put into groups, and they've been given different tasks to really explore what sustainability is about, thinking about how it affects football and the future.
Overall, the feedback from these young people is that they've had a wonderful afternoon here today.
I think it's important for football clubs to be sustainable because they hold a lot of power. Like, we've got to reuse everything so we can keep the planet safe.
As far as I'm aware, we're the only people delivering this service at the moment, using football to talk to kids, reframing everything that they thought they knew about sustainability in a new, fresh and dynamic way, doing our bit collectively towards this common goal of making the world a better place.
Well done, Elliot. Thank you. So you have heard it. There's football's own vulnerability, right? How to have games, how to play in the heat, how to have a stadium that is safe. There is football's climate footprint, predominantly through travel, fans, but also through operating a stadium. We'll get into that later. There is football's trust and influence, its cultural and societal trust it enjoys, and the social cohesion it brings. I'm currently as an observer here at COP, and I've managed large publishing companies that dealt with fashion and travel and architecture and other things. And so I know from many industries where people start thinking, what can we do together with an industry? But I have to say, I cannot think of any other, if we call it an industry or a cultural phenomenon, that has the influence that football has, at least in our part of the world. And you will see just the wide spectrum when you look at what our panelists are doing here tonight. I'll quickly introduce them. There's Chris Gaunt. He is the finance director of Hibernian. We have, excuse me for not starting with you, Eva, of course, to my left, Eva Ralston. She is the captain of Strathclyde University's women's team, forward player, right? And there is Norman Gill. He is the chief operating officer of something I didn't know exists, and I'm so impressed by what you're doing, Street Soccer Scotland. Really fantastic. He will talk about it later. To my left is Iain McMenemy. He's the chairman of Stenhousemuir. And to my right is Andy Smith. He represents the fans, to be exact, 78,000 at current count, right? So I want to start for the obvious reason of here at COP not being enough women in the delegation and not enough young people. It's obvious that we'll start with Eva tonight. Eva, when you hear the sentence climate change or the words climate change in football in one sentence, what comes to mind? What do you think? Yeah, please.
Hello. Hi. I think personally now it's something that the game is under threat more than ever. It's something that as a club we haven't really thought about until COP came to Glasgow. However, as mentioned, when it comes to things like pitches being flooded and playing in excessive heat in the summer, it's two things that no footballer enjoys. For us, training's cancelled because of a flooded pitch, and that impacts your game that week, and it's a recurring cycle. But I think that football's a universal game, and I think just now the influence that it has as a collective over the world, it's able, would it be fans, clubs, players, officials, anyone affiliated with a club, are able to use that platform and encourage anyone to change the slightest thing in their life to make it a little more sustainable.
You're studying law and you're interested in sports
Yes.
law. I've heard there's just one study now in the UK that offers sports and sustainability as a university subject. Is that something you would study, or you know some of your friends that would study?
Yeah, definitely. I think if given the option, it would be something that is so new and so current that it impacts all of us, especially as someone who enjoys the sport so much and watching it and taking part. It's something that we have to make a change and adapt our lives. Just like I said, the smallest thing we can do can affect it.
Thank you, Eva. Often when you hear about making a business more sustainable, lowering its carbon footprint or bringing it down to zero or lowering its plastic footprint, it's a discussion around cost. What does it cost? First of all, finding out, and then what does it cost? Chris, you're the finance director of a major football club. When I, with my team, did the first carbon audit at Condé Nast, and we used up a huge amount of paper, as you can imagine, with all these magazines. In the beginning, it was about compliance and wanting to know what's our footprint. And then suddenly the conversation changed and we realized we can save a lot of money. But we discovered waste. Have you had similar thoughts when you look at how you run your stadium, which is one of the 5 biggest stadiums in Scotland, if I'm...
Yeah, so thanks for that. Easter Road Stadium is a very historic stadium. Huge stadium in the middle of Leith. The thing about it being historic was it was built at a time period where sustainability was not something that was really well thought out. So it's not necessarily insulated very well. So an energy audit is something we've kicked off now to kind of figure out what are the small changes we can make. I mean, as easy as putting timers on some lights and heating just to make sure we can do those small little changes. But there's also just opportunity with the size of the stadium, with what we can do to it. So one of the things that I'm really keen, and I'm waiting for the final go ahead that it's going to get done. It's been signed, but we're going to be putting the solar panels on our east stand, and as well as at our Hibernian training center. And that will allow us to be able to save money, because the energy cost this past year has just exploded. And so if we could lock in that at a fixed sort of power purchase agreement, that it would allow us to be able to sort of lower our costs too. It'd be something that would be great.
Do you have a rough idea what the footprint is of the food you serve? I know it's typically subcontractors in stadiums, but still you are a major restaurateur, so to say, massive buying power.
Yeah, so what it is a big footprint, but we've actually just signed up this we haven't actually used it yet, but we signed an agreement. It was all over our social media is Too Good to Go app. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of that, but essentially all the food that at the end of the game, if we have any extra pies or different things, Bovril if you wanted, I guess, that you can sign up on there and you can buy a mystery box that'll allow you to take home all the excess stuff. So it allows us to hopefully limit the waste that we have there.
That's right. Andy, we just heard from Elliot earlier that 70 to 80% of the carbon footprint of football is from the travel of the fans. Now, of course, that includes flying also with the bigger tournaments. What do you think as a representative of the fans? What are the alternatives?
We're all fans. Everyone's fans. COP26, many of the promises people make in COP26 will be forgotten very quickly. But the thing that has come here is there is a level of awareness of a problem about to hit us all that everybody in the UK, maybe not in China and other countries yet, but everyone here signs up. We're there. We're ready for change more than there's ever been change in the past. So we're not set in what we did in 1974. So for me, the world going forward will be different, but the biggest issues are, and it's the same problem in politics as it is in football. If you get one fan and ask him a question, he'll give you an answer that's about self-interest for him and his club. If you get fans around this room to talk about problems, we'll actually come out with an interest that's for the common good. That's a huge difference. Self-interest takes you the wrong way. That's where the planet has been hurtling because big business and its greenwashing is just trying to keep doing what it's always done. But if we can break through it and get common good in what we do, and that takes leadership. And by the way, this guy's club is the first in Scotland to do what they're doing. And even then, what they're doing shouldn't be kept for Hibs. There should be a wall somewhere where someone says, I can buy plastic cups for 1p each. Here's the supplier. Because it's lots of little ideas that are going to make the difference. Or here's something we've learned. You deal with this company, you put this program in, and it saves 30% of your energy. Then there should be a wall, a football wall, because football doesn't have leadership. Football is self-interested. FIFA are self-interested. UEFA are self-interested. They're up to their necks with Gazprom. They don't even sell to consumers, they sell to governments. So football is conflicted. But to come back to your wonderful question, what will fans do? Well, we have to tell them why. We have to take them with us. We have to keep it so it's transparent, so it's not here's a new law because. Until recently, to fight the pandemic, we had a thing called the Joint Response Group, JRG, set up between our two football authorities and sometimes the government. Go online, sorry, just to finish. Go online and try and find any report from any meeting they've had. There's none. It's all done behind closed doors. So what football must do going forward now, I think, is do it in the full public eye and light and tell people, here is, if you're going to travel to Aberdeen to see Hibs play next week, take the train, here's the deal. That's learning. We have to learn together because the future is very different to the past.
Do fans organize their buying power? Does that happen large scale, what you just suggest? Because you could charter your trains together. I think that's happening, right?
Through clubs. I think clubs have to work together for the common good. And the common good of using the... Once the Hearts fans in Edinburgh see the Hibs fans have been going up to Aberdeen and it's £10 on a train or something, they'll all say, we want that too. It's this common good wall for the good of the country. Learn from each other. If Hibs buy cups for a penny each for Bovril, because Bovril at a Scottish football ground is a tradition for those of you who don't have it. You'd never have it any other time, but at a football ground, it's great.
Iain, can a club offer more sustainable food, use more sustainable or sustainable non-fossil energy for the stadium lights, everything else involved, without raising the price?
It absolutely can. I think the frustrating thing, I think, in football clubs is we're not asking football clubs like my own and others, we're not asking them to invent anything or to come up with a new product that has to try and save the world or save something. It's already all there. It's already out there. We just need to tap into it. And it's a simple part of the process. All we have to do really is to make the business case. And the business case, again, is something that is actually there. You can put the solar panels you talked about. They may not have the same feed-in tariffs they had, maybe 5 years ago or a decade ago, but you can still put solar panels on there, and there are grants available to do it. You can put one of the things for ground source heat pumps is you require either a really, really deep hole, which can be achieved quite simply, or a large foot space. Now we have a great foot space under the pitch, so we can absolutely, move towards that. And again, the grants are there. But to pick up maybe on Andy's point, what it actually requires is somebody to be able to coordinate this at a central level within Scottish football. So somebody in Scottish football that says, we'll coordinate all the things that clubs could do. And we can all feed into that and things we're doing in our own clubs, things we're trying to achieve. And we've just done all our internal lights and over to the LEDs and emergency lighting. We're just doing the floodlights over to LEDs, and we're looking at the ground source heat pumps under our pitch. We're doing all these things so we can feed that in. So it doesn't then make any sense for another club a few miles down the road or 100 miles away to go through the same pain that we're going through and trying to find out about feeding tariffs and grants available. It should all be shared. So one of the things that I'm keen to do, and it's come from some of the points you just raised here was going through my head. One of the things I will do is I'll go back and I will propose to, whether it's the Scottish Professional Football League or whether it's a Scottish FA, I'll propose that we actually have a central person employed in the football game as a sustainability officer who works with all the clubs to achieve these things. And we have that central resource so we can all deliver it.
The evening has its first resolution, I would say. That's fantastic. That's great. I want to hear from Norman. So Norman, can you just briefly introduce what Street Soccer Scotland does? And then I would like to ask you, what is the role of an organization like yours in climate education? And we also need to state that, of course, people who are socially vulnerable, poor, often are the hardest hit, also in our cities, by not living in an attic, a cooling system in the summers, old people, living in basements that get flooded and whatever else there is. How does climate change play a role in your work? But tell us a little bit about it first.
Yeah, okay, thanks. So Street Soccer Scotland provides free football. Anyone here could bring their trainers along and get a game. If you are at Strathclyde Uni, we do sessions up at Townhead. You'd be very welcome up there at some point. What we're trying to do is our players come from backgrounds, many from homelessness, they have mental health issues, some from the refugee community, a lot of long-term unemployment, people that are caught in a rut. They'll come for the football, we'll get involved, hi, what's your name, sign you up, you get a game. That's all that happens the first week. We'll walk alongside you, we'll understand a bit more about you, and it could take weeks, it could take months, but we'll understand what it is that you need and how we can help. And we'll take our time, we'll get to know you, we'll build a relationship so you trust us. And we'll make trusted connections as well and things that will last. So we'll try and create sustainable change for the person by the introductions that we'll make. That model of trust and the power of football, because it's football that brings you in, but it's really 20%-ish of what we do. We also use in schools to engage young people who are at risk of dropping out of school, to engage them back in, and they can do a qualification with us that then shows them the value of learning, and hopefully we pass them back to the teacher. A very, very similar model we use in prisons to work with prisoners. It's been quite difficult this last 18 months to get into prisons for obvious reasons, but we have a number of connections with prisoners who have come out, and we're able to work with them at our sessions. So we have that kind of pathway for someone when they come out. We also have a network program, which is looking to take this out into the community as well, and walking football and. So there's a number of different ways we use it, but it all comes back to the same model. Football's a hook. You come in, you get the trust, we build a relationship with you, we really understand you, and then we can get the right answer to you. We don't just create a form for you to fill in, and then we'll go and send it to someone who finds out what they think you should be doing, and then you do it. So it's all about that trust.
And trust is hugely important in climate communication, because in the end you have to trust the science. You can't replicate it yourself.
Exactly. So to your question around what role have we got, we've obviously got things that we try to do as an organisation, and certainly COP, as Eva said, has kind of brought it to the fore, and we're trying to think about a conversation today about how much we're spending on staff, fuel, etc., which is going to go only in one direction, down. We have a sponsorship deal with ScotRail, so I travel here by train tonight. We travel everywhere by train if we can. So there's various things we do. Our role, though, I think, is one of education. So with the best will in the world for our players, many of them are struggling. Some of them get up in the morning and the only thing they want to know is, where am I going to sleep tonight? Some of them get up in the morning and they're trying to decide whether they're going to heat or they're going to eat. And there are various levels of that and versions of that go on. Some struggling with addiction or just trying to worry about whether they can walk past, we had a conversation about this earlier, whether they can walk past William Hill's this morning to go and get a loaf of bread, or are they going to go in there? So climate change is not high on their agenda. Yeah. It's way down their agenda. And many of our players, we also spend, we do various qualifications with them. And a lot of the education that we do are things which certainly I picked up from my parents and through schooling. And if you've dropped out of school or your relationship with your parents isn't there to allow you to do it, you don't pick that up. So we're talking about budgeting, we're talking about really simple things like housekeeping, gatekeeping in your house, etc., etc. Climate change could be part of that, but there's no parent to pass it on anyway. So we have a big role to try and bring people up that journey. And I think that's something that we're going to look to do quite soon.
Cool. Norman, thank you for what you do. And I need your mic for Iain because I want to throw a fairly hard question at him. At least I think so. Iain, when I looked up your CV, I saw that you're an Iraq War veteran and you also have done some incredible groundwork setting up municipal elections in war-torn Srebrenica. So you understand system change and how to move entire communities. When we listen to each other, I'm sure we all think, and you think, well, this is kind of a no-brainer, so we should do all this. But we aren't, right? And just this last summer, we had a conversation about the Super League as an alternative to the current Champions League, which would have resulted, if I'm informed correctly, in something like 100 more games and a lot more flying. And the carbon angle on that story just never made it into the news. It was almost a taboo, which of course raises the systemic question, why is there such a taboo? And what is the elephant in the room of our conversation here?
That is a fantastic question that you make, a point that you make as well. Because who owns football? That's kind of where this is coming to. And we can do lots of things in football clubs and can be motivated to do lots of things in football clubs, but who owns the clubs and who owns football? And that's where you'll come across competing interests. And, you know, Gazprom was mentioned and things like that. I mean, my own personal belief is that the fans own football. Regardless of whose name is actually on the lease, it's the supporters that own football, particularly in Scotland, because Scotland has a disproportionate amount of income comes from supporters than anywhere else in the world. I saw a report this morning, I think it was something like 49% of the income is coming from directly from fans into the game, compared to, I think it was 13% in England from supporters directly through the gates. So Scotland relies on supporters, but really who owns clubs? And it's never nice to pick on any club, but I'll just look at the most recent one, you know, down south and with what happened at Newcastle. Obviously, there's ownership come in there, which has got some concerns about human rights issues, funding issues. And yet it seems that when the announcement came, you saw the supporters outside the ground cheering, the TV cameras are on them. They were saying, we've got our club back. This is the best day we've got. So it was like a free pass was given for everything that happened with human rights issues and things that happened in the Saudi embassy. A free pass was given because you're putting money into our club. So when you've got those sorts of competing interests in football, which we absolutely have, and then you have the self-interest, it's very, very difficult to get things to change. But just as what's happening here at COP26, it's going to be led not by the people that hold the power and the money in clubs. It's going to be led by the overwhelming number of people that are willing to band together to force through change. And that's the key thing. And I saw a wonderful, I heard a wonderful phrase just a few days ago, and I'm going to get it wrong, but it's something like, they said, we're not asking a lot of people to go to carbon zero perfectly. We're asking millions of people to get to carbon zero imperfectly. And that's saying it's people power. People banding together will make the difference. It won't be in the hands of those that have power. So it'll be a longer journey, but I'm absolutely confident we'll get there with it.
It's time for you to ask questions. There are no stupid questions whatsoever, okay? There are only questions, so please raise your hand. Lady in the back.
Hang on. Wait. There's a roving mic. Good evening.
Oh, okay. This hasn't happened before. But kind of as a question, as a fan of a team who is not represented here, there was talk of trying to make the sustainability more accessible to fans and more visible. But I know after speaking to my team, they do it behind the scenes and they try and make these actions happen. How are you going to ensure that pulling them to the front is not just going to be greenwashing? How is it it's going to actually make the change and it's not just going to make a good impact on your club? Chris?
It's a good question. I take Iain's point of a sort of a sustainability lead as sort of crucial to this. From our perspective, we've been very front facing with the greenest club in Scotland. And from that, we've really had to make sure that we're doing things that live to that. And when I came to the club in December of 2020. So sort of after the greenest club of Scotland came out and all that. So when I came in, it sort of was one of those things that kind of drove me to the club as well. I used to work at an energy generation company, so I knew the energy industry somewhat well. And when we make decisions, we have to make sure that we're actually keeping to that core. And so having someone that the ground pump, the ground pump's a great example of that. I had someone speak to me 2 days ago about it, and it's something I'm not really sure about. But if I could speak to a sustainability lead to make sure that I'm bouncing off the ideas that we're basically getting our green, we get our green correct, that it's actually through the business rather than greenwashing. It is a difficult one that if you don't have a sustainability lead actually doing it, that it could be seen as something that's sort of just kind of set in the background.
Did you answer your question? Cool.
Hey guys, just to add to that, and a point you made, Iain, as well about sort of centralized.
Can you tell us who you are or what you do?
Sorry, I'm Ali. Hi guys, and I run a sports tech company called Fanbase.
Cool.
So to your point, it feels like what's needed is a centralized sustainability person. It feels like every club's trying to tackle this individually. Has there not been that kind of progress from SFA or SPFL to say, yeah, we really need to think about this centrally? I'm just thinking heat pumps on pitches, great idea. Purchase that centrally, probably way more effective and way faster to deliver than everyone trying to do it themselves. So yeah, it's just what's the...
Can you just summarize your question in one sentence? Because I didn't understand it, but you sound really smart.
I guess the point is, has there really been no discussion, SPFL and SFA wise, about centrally tackling the problem of sustainability in Scottish football?
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, I can certainly answer that. There hasn't really been any push around these things. And unfortunately, Scottish football works in a very disparate way. They talk about the football family. It's a very dysfunctional family in football, particularly in Scottish football, with a very top-heavy voting system and distribution of funds, and it's all very, very complex. So there hasn't really been that push, and there needs to be that push. But what I would just actually point out that Ali, the company he talks about is a company that we're actually working with, Fanbase. It was through necessity, perhaps, in the pandemic. When we couldn't do physical tickets, we started to get some fans back, and so they're an online platform that you could use, which became quite affordable to small clubs. So things like that, again, which just cuts out on paper tickets and all these sorts of things. Again, it's all things we should be doing, but we probably should be doing on a centralised basis. Scottish football hasn't been good at it, which is why perhaps having some sort of sustainability lead that works with the clubs, that does the work once and then has it there for all clubs to tap into, might just be the answer.
I think there was a question over there, right? Just tell us quickly what you do.
Hi, I'm Joel. I volunteer with Football for Future.
Cool.
I was interested in what you were saying about what street soccer Scotland do, and also about what you were saying about Scottish fans and how they relate to climate change. I was just interested how your approach is to communicating climate change in sort of layman terms to people who perhaps, as you say, it's not at the top of their agenda. How would you go about doing such a thing and bringing them on that journey that you were both talking about?
I'll go first, and then
Please,
Andy will
no.
have a view. At the moment, we don't. So it's a challenge and something that we're going to try and meet head on. What we will always try to do is to raise awareness first, and just tie the issue to people's everyday lives. That's where it becomes a challenge because people have so many other big things to think about. As an example, some of the players that we've had have come through our volunteer program and become members of staff. And when I talk to them about, and I don't get to wear a tracksuit and play football, I'm the boring guy that does numbers. So when I talk to them about pensions, I'm not going to live that long. They don't think about 30 years' time for themselves. Never mind what the planet might be like in 50 years' time. So there's a whole mindset shift to take place there. And that's what we do over a period of time. But we've got to unlock that first before we can actually do the education piece. So my answer to that is we're not doing it at the moment as part of our big challenge.
Laura, how much more time do we have? Do we have to stop short? Good, good. All right, a few more questions.
I think we have.
Lady back there.
I think we have one more down here. So because I'm sitting here.
I'm sorry, yeah, why don't we start since the mic is already there? Hi.
Hi, my name's Iain. I work in the Scottish Government, not in sport, sorry.
Hi, Leanne.
So you guys have all made some really good points and suggestions about things you can do that potentially could save the club money or make the club money, along with actually being green. What about the things that are going to cost money? So things like programs potentially are a waste of paper. Fans love programs. Strips, home kits, away kits, thirds kits. Do you really need all these things? They are bringing a lot of money into your clubs, but are they necessarily sustainable? Or can they be made green? Can it be done cheaply? Or are you going to have to take a hit for these kind of things?
I'm so glad you're saying that because I noticed that with my kids, they got introduced to fast fashion through the sports jerseys. The constant turnaround, and then of course, mostly non-biodegradable. It's a great question, thank you. Does anyone want to take that hot potato?
I'm happy to go first on that. I think clubs will get to the point where they can do that. I think there's the low-hanging fruit where you can get some grants towards doing some work in the ground, and as you rightly say, if you can get half the money coming from a grant funding to replace your floodlights with LEDs, you're going to go for that first. In terms of the income generation, I think there's lots of ways that it can be done in a modern sense, in a modern way. Programs, for example, there are the collectors out that like to have them, but I do think programs will be going. It's only a matter of time. They've gone in lots of the smaller clubs already. We don't really have a program at all anymore in our club. You have the online versions and things you can send out. There is technology there which I've seen in operation where fans come into ground and you buy your virtual program and so the content that the club produces, rather than somebody going away and writing the manager's piece and doing a profile on the visiting team and the stuff that's the kind of bread and butter of programs, you can do video content, something that's a bit more creative, and folk go in there and as part of the virtual program you've bought, you click the button and you got virtual videos of the manager talking about things and with other clubs and things like that. So I think there's ways you can even enhance the traditional program. Match strips will be the killer blow for a lot of clubs because the money that's added on to kit is just ridiculous. It should never cost what it's costing to buy and kit your whole family out in strips. It just shouldn't be the case. So that will be the one that will be the challenge for football clubs. But that might come at the end, but I'm pretty sure it will come.
Thank you, Wolfgang. Yeah, football's changing, right? The world's changing, whether it's the spray foam that the referees use or the way that the spot kicks are taken, with one player these days as opposed to two, where you can pass it into the box from a goal kick to a player. VAR, football's changing, the world's changing, programs are going to change. The way we do a lot of things are going to change in the game. I think what's really important is that we keep what we love about football. What's really important about football, I think if we started, the SPL stuff, the Super League nonsense, that would have been terrible for the game. But programs or having electronic programs and different ways around doing things that we already do, I don't think that football fans would be upset with that. Even, you know, kits, for example, like you say, is another really big thing. The fast fashion industry is huge, and you know that needs to be at the forefront of this transition that we were talking about. But even at the moment, a lot of the kits in the Prem, for example, are being made out of recycled materials, you know, so that saves a lot of virgin materials and it saves a lot of stuff going into landfill. And we're seeing a big transition there. I'm absolutely sure that by the end of this decade, probably within the next couple of years, like all professional football teams will be using, you know, kits made out of recycled materials.
The point of superfluous merchandise, Andy also wanted to comment from a fan's perspective.
I think that's a big part of it. The clubs who make a fortune, like when Ronaldo signed for Man U, a huge percentage of his fee was funded almost overnight by the number of replica kits. They should all be recyclable. And thing that's changed in the world, and we're all part of what we've seen, and because it's in Glasgow, we're probably more into it than everyone else, but it's coming because COP22, none of us even know what happened there. You go to...
Still going.
It's still good. There you go. And we probably told as many lies then as we're doing now. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. When I go to Tynecastle and I'm given a cup of Bovril in a plastic cup, what am I going to say? Why is that in a plastic cup? That's a really small change. That's here. So then it's the thin end of the wedge, guys. That's the difference. It's not what the politicians have said and the lies that some of them will say or the mistruths they post. It's the fact that there is a general awareness. And for me, the biggest flaw in the whole argument is who can we rely on to be honest? Do we rely on our politicians? Are they being honest? Because everybody's conflicted. But as long as we're moving sort of the right way, Obama today said, we can't just sack everybody in the coal pits. You've got to make sure there's a transition period. So we're transitioning. But there's macro and micro. We'll all sign up for micro things. Who's guiding us on a macro level? And that, for me, is a question for you guys, because I don't know the answer.
We have observed one thing tonight, which is if I would sit in a fashion industry panel or travel industry, every panelist that represents a business would ask for more government regulation and the so-called level playing field, saying, yes, we'd like to do this, but it costs money initially. And I don't want to be the only one who makes these investments without everybody else making them as well. Otherwise, I will have to offer a more expensive product than the other guys or gals. So I find that interesting that no one mentioned that tonight, because I do think regulation plays a very important role.
Just on that, in terms of the cost of becoming more sustainable as a business, whether it's in football or not, everyone keeps on talking about the cost of making these changes, but I think it's important. The language that we're using, it shouldn't be a cost, it should be an investment, right? Over the long term, you're going to get your money back through either, you know, energy efficiencies in a variety of different ways, and also through, you know, it affects the brand of your organization. If you're at the forefront of sustainability, everyone's going to do it eventually. The people who go first are going to reap the greatest rewards in terms of sponsorship deals, awareness all around the world. I mean, look at Forest Green Rovers. They've got an international fan base. Dale Vince he's a thought leader in this space, right? So I think we need to talk about it being an investment. It's going to save you money and it's going to do your brand the world of good, because at the end of the day, you know, everyone's going in this direction regardless. So the Trailblazers will reap the greatest rewards, I reckon.
Your question.
Hi, my name is Olivia. I'm here for COP. I'm with Extinction Rebellion. So obviously we're trying to save the planet, which is quite hard work. I would like to kind of stop talking about T-shirts and things and talk about how football touches billions of hearts around the world in a way that pretty much nothing else does. And how can we use that emotional connection and love to move people about the planet?
Which that power of football, the fossil energy industry has discovered as well, as we can tell. If you look at this, if you just look at the website of Qatar Airways, who they sponsor, it's like a who is who of sports, or ownership of who owns PSG Paris. The role, and that's what I meant with the taboo earlier, the enormous power of football is well understood also by people with very different intentions. And that is systemic change where I think, yes, all power to the fans, but there is also a regulatory angle that needs to be discussed. Does anyone want to try and answer the question, very open question that the lady just posed?
Sorry, I know I'm hogging the mic a little bit. Sorry.
I think that, like we said, football is a global sport, and it's something that I think the clubs have to be held accountable, first of all, because it's the fans and the players who then follow in the footsteps. All it takes is for one player on the pitch to show his recognition and all this sort of thing about sustainability and climate change, and that one fan then takes the step, and every single fan around him does the same thing. So it's one person in power, and for the fans, I know as a football fan myself, if it takes one person in the team I support to do something, everyone's part of it, everyone gets involved. So it's a difficult question, but I think it does just take that one person who has that little more power or the public image to go ahead, and the fan base will follow, and then the club themselves feel accountable and they have to do something as a whole. And this then goes back to everything that's been spoken about in terms of matchday programs, and everything links in. It's all the one problem, but yeah, one person can completely change it for good, I think.
You said it far better than I was just going to say much the same thing. I think there's probably three areas where I mean, I'm a football fan. In fact, I'm a Hibs fan, so I'm quite enjoying the fact that Hibs are leading the way. And actually, from a fan's perspective, that's what I was going to say. You feel a bit of ownership because you feel, I mean, it'd be nice to win games more, but other than that, you feel a bit of ownership. You feel like, hey, my club's leading the way here. So there is leadership, you know, as Eva says, in terms of what we could do. I think there's a bit of incentives that the clubs could do. If 70% of the carbon cost of football comes from transport, I'm not sure why clubs are not at the forefront in terms of apps that allow you to car share or whatever. But I think the education is a massive part of it as well. And as you say, in the same way as our own organisation does, football captures people's hearts and they listen to it. So, you know, why don't we use football for the education?
Could I jump in just real quick? One thing that Forest Green does really well is they go out in the community to go to different schools to educate. And I think what we would like to do at Hibs is be more involved with that. We have these players that are heroes to these people in Leith, and we should. And I'm not saying we're not going to, but one thing that I'm taking away from this is that we really should be going to community to educate and to speak to them about the different initiatives that we have. So that's one thing I'm going to take away from this, is to make sure we do that.
Very good.
Can I add one thing to that as well, Wolfgang?
So we have 3 more questions. Do you still have your question? Because I never got to you. I'm sorry. Okay, so 3 more questions, and then I hate to say it, we have to wrap it up slowly, but those 3, and we will try to give short answers.
Okay, I'm Stephen McCard. I work for a company that designs mechanical and electrical systems in buildings. And a big part of our role now, in fact, it's the biggest part of our role now, is to try and get buildings to net zero carbon in terms of how they perform. We start with fabric first, and then we talk about the energy saving systems like ground source, air source, et cetera, et cetera. The reason I'm asking the question is that both from a private sector point of view and a public sector point of view, there's strong motivations coming from central government and from councils to make sure that the buildings, if they're public sector, for example, hospital, school, they physically don't get funding unless we can show very early in the course with the architect and the structural engineer that the building will perform to net zero. On the private sector, big corporates are just not going to be prepared to move into or to take ownership of buildings which have a poor carbon footprint and in fact don't actually comply. So my question is, why is it so difficult for the SFA or the SPL not to kick this off? Because I mean, the technology is there, it's happening in just about every other sector that I'm aware of, and I'm really at a loss to understand why the SFA hasn't sort of kicked this about, excuse the pun, a bit more.
In terms of the SPFL, I'll just give you an example, and you know, anybody that's Googled me will know I can be a critic of football structures. I'm quite open about that. But I'll give you one example. I asked in one of the meetings of the 42 clubs, I asked, what was our strategy? What was our business plan as a league body? And they decided to have an away day to work that out, and they came back. And when they returned, they said, what we've decided is that the SPFL will monetize competitions for the benefit of its members. That's the ambition. Nothing about inspiring another generation of footballers, nothing about reaching out to communities, nothing about trying to reach out on some of the big issues. And Scotland with its drug death crisis that's going on, and yet football is followed predominantly by a lot of working class young people who we could absolutely reach out and do something about. And whilst the girls' game is growing, and it's the fastest growing sport in the world, it is still at the moment more boys than girls playing it. So why are we not reaching out to boys at a very young age and talking about male privilege and power in the relationship with women to young boys and trying to influence at that point? Because we don't show enough leadership on these things. And so we have to get to the point where we're convincing the football authorities to get to that. Now, I'm a critic, and I raise these sorts of points at times, but we've got to get to the point where there's a critical mass when something's happening within clubs, when supporters are telling their clubs this is the change they want. So we've got to get to the point where supporters say to all clubs, these are the sorts of changes we want to have in there. And I don't fear regulation. I don't fear if we have government getting involved in how they regulate football clubs and starting to put some conditions in place that in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time, you have to meet certain criteria within grounds about ventilation or about with regards to generating energy. I don't fear that at all, as long as you have that transition phase to get there. So a combination of that will probably get us to where we want to get to in the end.
Short comment from Andy.
Yeah.
Football has forgotten its grassroots. It doesn't value its grassroots. We've got a World Cup going, which was bribed to go to Qatar, which has been moved, which is taking people there at the wrong time of year. We've got real issues. And right now, the Champions League, there's 4 countries who've got 4 teams each, and we've an ex-winner from Scotland, Celtic. We don't even get one there. Money talks and football at the top. What I would say to everyone here today, the way to fix this is grassroots. And I hope there's more publicity, but it's to fight it from the bottom up.
We have one more, I think. Time for one more.
One more, please. And then we need to say farewell, good night. Feel like singing.
Hello. So it turns out we're introducing ourselves now.
Great. Yes, I'm sorry about that.
I'm a 4th year product design student at Napier, but I have been a football fan since I can remember. And one thing I can remember going to football is the kind of people my dad's age and the generation above sitting around me, behind me, to the sides of me, and they are set in their ways. So it's all very good and well preaching to the younger generation, how great are the younger generation going to be for climate change, but how are you going to focus this for the clubs and the older generations to make these changes so it doesn't ruin the sport that we all love for my generation?
And that's a really strong comment I want to add, just because we speak about incremental changes, and I agree with that. But as a humanity, we have to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 45% by 2030. And that sounds nice. It's in less than 3,000 days from now. It means a total, hence the theme also of this conference, a total rethinking, redesigning, reimagining of literally everything. So we are under time pressure. And I think it's a good question also to the clubs. Maybe Chris, you want to jump in?
I was hoping you would not ask me to answer that question. It is a difficult one, because that kind of goes back to the cost of this. So when I had a BBC interview last week, and as part of that, I said that what I would like, investing in green initiatives is as important as making a signing of a player. And the feedback I got from that was quite loudly and strongly, what are you talking about? So it's an education. It's a difficult one. I struggle with that answer, and I would be keen to know what anybody else has to say about that, because it is a tough one. to try to change mindsets.
You know, it's fair to not know.
Yeah.
I think that's important, because that's so often missing, is to not get judged for not knowing yet. Having the question and being honest about not knowing yet, that's leadership in a time like that. So I salute you.
I would say the demographic is changing. Next to me, we've got Eva, who's plays at my football club as well at Stenhousemuir, and we didn't have a ladies team, a Stenhousemuir ladies team a few years ago. Maybe a decade ago we didn't. Now we have, and the fastest growing part in our club is the girls' game. We had a little bit of pushback maybe 5 to 10 years ago when we started doing under 16s for free to try and encourage young people to come along as a future of the club, to become the next, volunteers, the next board members, the next chairman potentially. We had a little bit of pushback from some of the older generation because they wanted to bring a drum and make some noise, and then when they wanted to go and get their halftime pie, there was a big queue of kids. And what we said to them was, those kids are probably spending more money than you are on your one cup of tea and a pie. So they've got as much right to be here, if not more, than you standing in that line to get it. So you've got to sometimes show leadership, in the sense clubs have to show leadership and be able to say how much you value each different part of the club. But I think through time, I think we are seeing a change in demographic. You are seeing different people coming into football clubs now. There's lots of clubs now doing under 16s free and these sorts of things. There's lots of clubs now doing, different age groups, and the women's game is as important as the men's game.
Last word. Sorry, I think just going back on that, I think it is probably our generation who has to start it. I know when it comes to anything, whether it be in political or in any kind of topic that's current just now, if it's me going into my house and telling my mum and dad or my grandparents, it's me who starts the discussion, or my cousins or my siblings, because I feel like if we begin it, and if we begin the whole change or pushing our clubs or the people who we support to do these sort of things, then that generation will just follow on. I mean, like you said, it's stuck in their ways, the same as us with certain things. But I think if we begin it, then like the generations above us they'll follow through, because they'll have no choice. It'll be them who are the odd ones out, and we're the ones making it more sustainable, or whatever it be in any context.
We're going to say goodnight. Stay around, have a drink, stay with us. Norman, thank you. Eva, Iain, Andy, Elliot, Chris, thank you very much. Thank you all for coming, asking such great questions. And to our friends who are watching the live stream, if you want to get in touch with any of the panelists here tonight, just go to the website of After the Pandemic and you will find links to their websites there. Thank you all. Thank you to the team of After the Pandemic, and see you again soon.
Okay, thanks so much, everybody. Just a final word for me. I think tonight, just hearing the themes of trust, of collaboration, of education, better education and communication, and also like complete systems change. It's super overwhelming. We've only scratched the surface tonight, but what I can hear tonight is that if we harness the power and the emotion and the love for the game, then we can make it greener. So thank you, everybody, and good night. Cheers.